The desert wind howled through the canyons of the Arizona Territory, kicking up dust and memory alike. Wes Calder squinted into the late afternoon sun, reins in one hand, the other resting near the worn grip of his colt. His horse plodded forward, hooves sinking into the red earth with each step. Behind him, 2 saddlebags bulged with crates of stolen repeater rifles, payment from a mining outfit too eager to move product and too cheap to use real couriers. Wes wasn't proud of the job, but pride didn't pay for whiskey or keep the ghosts quiet at night. Since the war ended, he'd drifted from one job to the next, never staying long enough to matter. When the scars on his soul itched too loud, he moved again. They told him to steer clear of Apache lands. Said the tribes were restless, watching every trail, every rider. Said the treaty wasn't worth the paper it was scribbled on. Wes had nodded and rode out anyway. He didn't fear dying, not anymore. But as the sun dipped behind the jagged cliffs and the first stars blinked to life, fear found him again, rising fast like a wildfire. It started with a whistle, sharp, distant, cutting through the stillness. Then came the arrows. They rained from the ridgeline above, whistling through the air with deadly precision. One struck his horse in the flank. The beast reared, screamed, and collapsed in a heap. Wes rolled clear, grabbing his rifle as shadows moved fast among the rocks. He didn't fire blindly. He picked his shots, dropping 2 figures who rushed too close. The rest faded into the twilight like spirits, leaving silence and smoke behind. Heart pounding, Wes crawled behind a fallen log. His hand touched something soft, warm and breathing. He spun, rifle ready, only to freeze. There, lying in the dirt, was a young woman. She wore fringed leather and beadwork, her skin painted in ritual markings, her dark hair matted with sweat. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, wild, defiant, and then closed again. Blood soaked her side where a stray round had grazed her ribs. Wes stared at her, confused. She wasn't dressed like a warrior. No weapons, no war paint, too young, too light. She didn't belong in the fight that had just taken place. Still, he couldn't leave her there. Grunting, Wes lifted her into his arms and stumbled away from the dead horse toward the tree line. He moved quick, staying low, until he found a small hollow beside the creek, just enough cover to rest. He laid her down gently, his hands shaking as he tore off a strip of his shirt to bind her wound. The bleeding wasn't bad, but she was burning with fever. Probably from the heat or shock or both. "What the hell were you doing out there?" he muttered, brushing the hair from her face. She didn't answer. Of course she didn't. When morning came, she still hadn't woken. Wes stayed beside her, rifle across his knees, watching the horizon. He knew someone would be looking for her. Probably soon. That's when the truth hit him hard. She wasn't a raider. She wasn't even meant to be there. And judging by the fine beadwork on her clothes, the silver pendant around her neck, and the ceremonial paint, she wasn't just any girl, she was someone important. Wes swore under his breath. He hadn't just killed 2 Apache warriors and run off with a girl. He'd taken the daughter of a chief, and if that was true, then war wouldn't be far behind. He looked down at her sleeping form. Her chest rose and fell slowly, peacefully, like she had no idea the storm she'd dragged him into. "Well, hell," he muttered. "What now, Calder?" The wind answered with silence. The sun rose slow over the ridge, casting golden light across the creek bed where Wes Calder knelt, trying to coax a fire to life. The air was sharp with pine and morning chill. Beside him, the girl, still unconscious, lay wrapped in his duster, her breath shallow but steady. Wes hadn't slept. He couldn't, not with what he'd done. He kept replaying the night in his head, the ambush, the rifle fire, the 2 Apache he'd killed, and the girl. He hadn't meant to take her. He didn't even realize he had until the adrenaline wore off and the silence settled in. But now he was in it, deep. She stirred just as the fire caught. A low groan escaped her lips, followed by a sharp intake of breath as pain twisted across her face. Wes moved slowly, hands raised. "Easy," he said softly. "You're hurt." "Don't try to sit up." Her eyes snapped open, deep brown, fierce. Even wounded, there was fire in them. She reached for something that wasn't there, likely a blade she'd once carried, and hissed through her teeth. Wes backed off a few feet, letting her take him in. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said. "You're safe, for now." She didn't understand the words. That much was clear. But she understood him, the way animals did. Her gaze held no trust, only caution. She looked down, saw the bandage on her side. Her fingers brushed it, then darted away like she'd been burned. "Bullet grazed you," Wes explained, gesturing to her ribs. "Could have been worse." She looked at the wound, then at him, and something changed. Her breathing slowed, but her posture stayed rigid. Her dignity remained unbroken. "Name's Wes," he offered, pointing to himself. "Wes Calder." She said nothing. "Only watched. You got a name?" he asked. No answer. He didn't press. The next hour passed in silence. She wouldn't eat the hard tack or jerky he offered, only sipped water from a tin cup when he backed off. She studied him like a hawk, every movement, every sound. Not with fear, but calculation. This wasn't a girl used to being powerless. That much Wes knew. When the sun climbed higher, he packed their things. He had no map, no plan, just a growing sense that staying put was the worst idea imaginable. He couldn't take her back to town, not with bounty posters of his face starting to show up in the border settlements. And he damn sure couldn't just ride into Apache lands and drop her off. That was a death sentence. He'd have to figure something out. For now, they needed distance. "All right," Wes said, squatting beside her.
"We've got to move."
"You can ride or I can carry you." "Your choice," she scowled at him. Still didn't speak. But after a pause, she held out her hand, slow, deliberate. Her pride wouldn't let her ask for help, but she'd take it. He lifted her gently, careful not to jar the wound. She didn't cry out, just clenched her jaw. Stronger than most men he'd known. As he settled her onto the horse, she whispered something under her breath. A single word. "Tala." He looked at her. "That your name?" She didn't repeat it. Just looked forward, lips tight. "Tala," he said again, testing it. It felt right. Fierce. Beautiful. Untamed. They rode through the canyons in silence. Her weight pressed against him, and he could feel the tension in her shoulders. She didn't trust him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she was with him now. And that meant her problems were his. As the sun dipped low again, painting the rocks in blood-red hues, Wes spotted smoke curling in the distance, too small for a town, too steady for a campfire. He pulled the reins and turned the horse. Tala tensed behind him, whispering something he didn't catch, her voice sharp. "Easy," he said. "Just scouting." But he had a feeling in his gut. Something was off. Then came the sound. A scream, then gunfire. Close. Wes cursed and turned the horse hard. Behind him, Tala said nothing, but she no longer looked afraid. She looked angry. The smoke rose in lazy spirals above the canyon edge as Wes Calder dismounted, rifle in hand. Tala slid off the horse behind him, still favoring her wounded side but standing tall. She moved quietly, barefoot now, blending into the landscape like she'd been born from the very stone and wind. Wes crouched low and scanned the scene below. A half-burnt wagon, a dead mule, and two bodies sprawled in the dirt. One of the bodies was still twitching. Gunmen. Outlaws, maybe. Or worse. "Stay here," Wes whispered. Tala ignored him, stepping forward. Her gaze fixed on the wagon, eyes narrowing. "Damn it," he muttered, following her down the incline. They reached the wreckage in seconds. Wes rolled the twitching man over, young, pale, blood soaking his shirt. "Not long for this world. Help," the man rasped. They took him. South, girl. "And boy, who?" Wes demanded, but the man's eyes were already glassy. He coughed once more, then went still. Wes stood up, heart pounding. Tala was already searching the wagon. She pulled something from the debris, a scrap of cloth, woven with tribal patterns. Wes frowned. "Yours?" She nodded once, and just like that, he understood. This wasn't a random ambush. This was a message. They weren't hunting her. They were hunting them, her people. Whoever had raided this wagon wasn't after loot. They were taking prisoners, and they didn't care who got in the way. That night, they camped beside a sandstone cliff under a sky full of stars. Tala sat across the fire from him, her face unreadable, legs folded beneath her. She'd spoken little since the attack, but Wes could feel something shifting between them. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. He passed her a canteen, then took a slow breath. "I fought in the war," he said suddenly, staring into the flames. "Union side. Thought I was doing something noble. Afterward, they gave me a pat on the back and a train ticket west." Tala watched him in silence. "Since then, I've done a lot of things I ain't proud of. Rode with the wrong men. Took jobs that paid in blood. Figured I was too far gone to start over. Still nothing." But her eyes stayed on him. He glanced up. "You ever lose someone?" At that, something flickered in her expression. Her jaw tightened. She pointed toward the firelight, then lifted 2 fingers. Slowly, she placed them over her heart. "2," Wes translated quietly. She nodded. "Family?" Another nod. Wes swallowed. The fire popped between them, sending sparks into the air. "I'm sorry." The word sounded weak, but it was all he had. Tala looked away. After a long pause, she murmured something low, Apache words, sharp and melodic. Then, in halting English, she added, "Not your fault." Wes blinked. It was the first time she'd spoken English to him. He didn't know what to say. They sat there for a while, the silence comfortable for once. But beneath it, Wes felt a slow burn growing, something dangerous, something human. He wasn't just protecting her anymore, he cared. And that scared him worse than any bullet. By dawn, they were riding again, heading south, following what little trail the raiders had left. Footprints, a snapped branch, a broken arrow tip. Tala tracked like she was born for it. Wes didn't ask questions. He just followed. By mid-morning, they reached a rocky overlook. Below, in a dry valley, they saw a small caravan moving, 3 riders, 2 prisoners tied to a mule. Tala gripped Wes's arm, her fingers digging in. He looked closer. The prisoners were children, Apache, a boy and a girl. "Damn," Wes muttered. "We can't take 'em all head on." Tala stepped back and drew something from her satchel, a small pouch of herbs, tied with a bone clasp. She handed it to Wes, then pointed to the wind. "Sleep," she said. He frowned. "You mean knock 'em out?" She nodded. Wes grinned, despite himself. "Now that's an idea." As he mixed the herbs into the last of their coffee, he realized something strange. For the first time in years, he felt alive, not as a gun for hire, not as a drunk or a drifter, but as a man who had a reason to fight. The sun was dipping low over the valley as Wes Calder poured the drugged coffee into a tin cup and set it on a flat rock beside the trail. Nearby, Tala crouched in the brush, eyes fixed on the 3 riders approaching with their captives in tow. The raiders were loud, careless. Confederate cast-offs by the look of them, dirty coats, yellowed teeth, and the swagger of men who thought nothing could touch them this far from law. Wes slipped back beside Tala, his rifle ready. "They stop for the coffee. We move fast. 1 shot if things go wrong. No more." Tala didn't respond. She was already stringing a rawhide sling between 2 rocks, placing small stones inside, primitive, silent, deadly. The plan worked. As the raiders dismounted to rest, one of them spotted the cup, sniffed it, then laughed and took a long drink. 10 minutes later, 2 were unconscious. The third, likely smarter, reached for his revolver, but Tala's sling snapped forward. The stone hit him square in the temple. He dropped like a sack of flour. Wes moved fast, cutting the children loose as Tala kept watch. "Where are your people?" Wes asked the older of the 2, a girl no more than 10. She pointed east toward the mountains. Tala knelt beside the children, speaking in soft Apache. Her voice changed, gentle, almost maternal. The boy clung to her like a shadow. Wes stood and looked down at the unconscious raiders. "We ought to kill 'em," he muttered. "They'll just do it again." Tala looked up at him, then at the children. Her meaning was clear, not in front of them. He nodded slowly. Then we tie 'em good and leave 'em for the coyotes." They rode east for 2 days, skirting patrols and circling through dried-out riverbeds. The air grew cooler as they climbed into the foothills, and Wes started to notice the land changing. Less scrub, more pine. Fresher water, older silence. Then came the smoke. Black. Plumes rising above the treetops. Thick. Oily. Wrong. They reached the ridge at dusk and saw the ruins below, Tala's. Village had been burned to the ground, dozens of tents gone, scorched earth. Bodies strewn among the ashes, not warriors, women, elders, children, slaughtered. Wes felt his stomach turn. Jesus! Tala slid off the horse without a word and walked into the ruins. She moved slowly as if her bones were hollow. Wes followed, rifle ready, but nothing stirred. The girl they'd rescued screamed suddenly and ran to a charred blanket. A child-sized skeleton lay beneath it. Tala didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, frozen in place, staring at the destruction. Then she sank to her knees. Wes crouched beside her. "We're too late. I'm sorry." She shook her head, eyes locked on the smoking ground. Then she reached into the ash and pulled something out. A broken necklace of turquoise and bone. She showed it to Wes. "Father." Wes blinked. "That belonged to your father?" She nodded once, but her face said something else. "He's not here," Wes realized. "No body," Tala pointed east again. "Prisoners," she said. "Not dead. Taken." Wes stood, fists clenched. This wasn't just murder. This was extermination, and someone wanted the Apache gone for good. That night, as they camped under the trees, Tala finally spoke. "Treaty," she said, "was promise. No more war." Wes stared at the fire. "Yeah, well, white men break promises all the time." She looked at him. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. The truth was too big for one sentence. "Land," he finally said. "Gold, rails. People back east want this land, and they don't care who dies to get it." She looked away. Her jaw clenched. Wes leaned forward. "But not everyone's like that." "Not me." She studied him for a long time. "You are white man." He nodded. "I am. Why help me?" He thought about that. "Really thought? I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe I'm tired of being the kind of man who doesn't." The next morning, they buried the bodies. They built no graves. Just stones. Quiet. Respectful. Then Tala painted a symbol on her face, red and black, and tied the broken necklace around her wrist. Wes checked his rifle, loaded his pistol, and tightened his saddlebag. "Where to now?" he asked. Tala pointed toward the horizon. "Fort Clay." Wes raised an eyebrow. "That's a military outpost?" She nodded. "Where they take prisoners." He whistled low. "You're planning to break into a fort?" Tala met his eyes. "No, we take it." Wes laughed, then stopped, because she wasn't joking, and for the first time, he didn't doubt her, not even a little. The sun rose blood-red over the desert as Wes Calder and Tala stood atop the ridge overlooking Fort Clay. Built from rough timber and arrogance, the fort stood like a scar on the land, guard towers, barracks, and a main compound surrounded by thick palisades. Inside, soldiers moved in tight formations, oblivious to the storm coming for them. Wes exhaled through his teeth. "You weren't lying," he muttered. "They're dug in good." Tala crouched beside him, scanning the terrain. 4 watchtowers. 2 gates. South side weak. Supply trail. Less guards. Wes turned to her. "And you're sure your father's in there?" She gave one short nod. "Him, others, children too." Wes rubbed a hand over his face. "Damn it!" They had 8 fighters, survivors from the burned village, 1 grizzled ex-scout, 2 teenage boys who barely knew how to hold a rifle, and him, a broken down cowboy with no future. Against a fort of over 30, trained men with Gatling guns and orders to shoot to kill. It was suicide. But something deep in Wes's chest, some buried piece of himself that hadn't spoken since the war, refused to walk away. "They'll never see us coming if we move at night," he said finally. "And we hit the supply gate hard and fast. Draw their fire, let the others inside. Tala looked at him. You stay with me? I ride with you, he said. To the end. She didn't smile, but she placed a hand over his, just for a moment, and nodded. Night fell. The wind picked up, scattering sand and covering their movements. Under the cloak of darkness, they rode silently, splitting into two groups. Wes led the assault on the southern supply gate, creeping through the brush with 4 fighters. Tala and the others flanked the eastern wall with climbing hooks and stolen ropes. Everything hung on timing. At the stroke of midnight, Wes lit a small charge of dynamite and tossed it at the gate. The explosion shattered the night. The guards scrambled in confusion, and Wes surged forward, firing from the hip. He dropped 2 men before they even raised their rifles. Go, go! He shouted, kicking the gate wide open. Inside the fort, chaos exploded. Bells rang. Orders were shouted, but Tala's group was already scaling the wall. One boy fell, shot clean through the chest, but the others made it over. From the shadows, Tala moved like smoke, silent, lethal. Her knife found throats before voices could rise. She reached the holding pens and tore open the cages. Inside were over 20 Apache, elders, women, children, and her father, Chief Nahilo, bound and beaten but alive. When he saw her, his old eyes welled with tears. He reached for her, but Tala only whispered, "Not yet. We fight first." Wes ducked behind a wagon as bullets flew past his head. One of his men went down beside him, gut-shot and screaming. Blood slicked the dirt. A Gatling gun roared from the guard tower, chewing up the front yard of the fort. "We're gonna get pinned down here," someone yelled. Wes looked at the tower, 30 feet up, exposed. "Cover me!" He barked. He broke into a sprint, dodging bullets, leaping over crates. A round grazed his shoulder, but he didn't stop. He reached the base of the tower, grabbed a dangling rope from Tala's group, and climbed. By the time the soldier manning the gun turned, Wes tackled him off the platform. They both crashed to the ground. Wes landed hard, ribs screaming. The soldier reached for a knife, but Wes was faster. One swing of his rifle butt ended it. He stood, bloodied and gasping, just as Tala appeared beside him. They looked around. The fort was falling. Smoke rose from every corner. Apache fighters had armed the freed prisoners, turning the captives into warriors. The U.S. flag that flew above the compound now lay burning in the dirt. The last soldiers threw down their weapons. It was over. Later, Wes stood outside the charred gate, leaning on his rifle. The air stank of blood and gunpowder. Tala emerged from the barracks, her face streaked with ash, but her eyes calm, strong. Her father walked behind her, limping but upright. Nahilo stepped in front of Wes and studied him for a long time. Then he spoke, slow and low in English. "You are not Apache, but you bleed like one." Wes nodded. "Did what I could." Nahilo placed a hand on his shoulder. "You stay with us?" Wes looked to Tala. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The first light of dawn crept over the desert as Wes Calder stood at the edge of Fort Clay, now just a skeleton of charred wood and blood-stained dust. Smoke still drifted from what used to be the commander's quarters. The gates hung open. The flagpole, once towering and proud, now stood bare. For the first time in years, Wes wasn't running. Behind him, freed Apache families gathered what supplies they could. Children laughed softly, wounded but alive. Tala moved through them with quiet authority, speaking in a calm voice, helping the elders prepare for the journey back to the highlands. Wes watched her from a distance, knowing something had changed, not just the land, him. A week later, they stood on a rocky bluff overlooking the vast red canyons of Arizona. Nahilo, his wounds bandaged but his voice strong, addressed a delegation of army officials and railroad men under the uneasy shade of a temporary white tent. Wes stood beside Tala, unshaven and sunburnt, his hat in his hand. The talks had taken days. No one trusted anyone, but the attack on Fort Clay had shaken the men from Washington. The Apache had proven they wouldn't go quietly. And Wes had spoken when no one else would. He'd told the truth about the broken treaty, about the killings, about the greed. He didn't mince words. And he didn't let them forget the cost. So now, a new treaty lay on the table, one with land rights, protection, and something no paper ever promised before: dignity. Tala whispered something in Apache to her father, then stepped forward. She stood beside the table, eyes unblinking, and placed a bundle of ashes and broken beads before the officials. "My people," she said, her voice sharp, "have buried enough." One of the men, a portly colonel with sweat on his brow, looked away. Nahilo signed the treaty. Then Wes did too, though no one had asked him to. He just did it, not as a soldier, not as a criminal, as a witness. That night, under a sky full of stars, the tribe celebrated, not with loud cheers, but with firelight, stories, and songs that hadn't been sung in years. Wes sat on a log, sipping strong black coffee, watching Tala dance with the children around the flames. Her laughter drifted through the air like smoke, soft, free. He smiled, then he stood and walked away from the fire, toward the quiet of the rocks. She followed. "You go?" she asked, her voice like wind over stone. He looked out over the desert. "I've been running my whole damn life, Tala. Never stayed anywhere more than a season." Figured that's just what I was meant for. Silence passed between them, then he added, "But now, I ain't so sure." Tala stepped beside him. Her hand found his. "You helped us, fought with us, bled with us," he nodded. "And I'd do it again." "You are not Apache," she said softly. "But you are." "Something?" He smiled. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." She smiled back, genuine, full of fire. "I stay," he said, not a question. A vow, months later. Wes Calder stood barefoot in a river, teaching a group of Apache boys how to skip stones. He'd traded his Colt for a fishing spear, his coat for a sun-worn vest. The scars on his heart were still there, but they'd stopped bleeding. Tala sat on the bank nearby, sketching patterns into the dirt. A beaded necklace hung from her neck, one he'd made with his own hands. Far above them, a train whistle echoed across the canyon. The railroad still came, relentless as time, but it would go around the valley now, not through it, because this land, this home, had been earned in blood, honor, and fire. Wes looked at Tala, and for the first time in a lifetime of running, he didn't wonder what was next. He already knew.